Well, good afternoon and welcome to our Lunch Chats Keeping You Healthy web series. My name is Krista Deans and I manage public relations for San Ramon Regional Medical Center. For today's presentation, we have the pleasure of introducing Rida Wali. She's a clinical dietitian and she is going to give us some tips and advice on creating a healthy plate. Thanks so much for joining us today, Rida.
Thanks, Krista. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and I'll let you take the reins and we can't wait to hear what you have to say today.
Great, thank you. So this presentation is really about creating a healthy plate and essentially outlining healthy, simple meals that families can do, individuals can do. And of course, throughout the presentation, I'll weave in chronic disease prevention and general healthful lifestyle. I would like to mention all of this information is very general and this in no way substitutes any kind of medical advice that you would get from your physician. So yeah, let's dive right in. Before we discuss, how to create healthy meals, let's talk a little bit about food patterns and how we're eating these days. Not really discussing stats here, but if we look around, just within the past few decades, definitely within the past century, our food patterns have changed massively. So, let's think 1 or 2 generations ago. We used to spend a lot of time on food prep meals, family meals, cooking meals, preparing food, purchasing food, growing food. Now, fast forward, a lot of us, and of course, speaking very, very generally, a lot of us are not spending that tremendous amount of time on preparing meals, cooking meals, or even serving meals. So there's a lot of changes that have happened, and the majority of the changes have been just the time spent on making meals and preparing meals. There's a lot of eating on the go. So whether, pre-COVID times, whether you're eating at work or eating on the go or soccer practices. So a lot of this stuff, when I see patients for counseling sessions, these are some of the main themes that come up. Is like there's just no time to cook food or prepare food or eat food or take a long time to even eat food. So eating on the go and just eating quickly, not spending that time preparing meals, is just sort of the general patterns that are occurring in my practice that I've seen in patients. And the main reason I would say why this is happening is that we do have access to a lot of processed and pre-made food. So when you go to the grocery store, it's very easy to pick up meats that are marinated and cut, and all you need to do is just quickly stir fry them. Vegetables that are already prepped and chopped. So a lot of our food preparation has essentially turned into food assembly. So to give you an example, let's say you're trying to make spaghetti and meatballs. We have the option now of, buying a dry package of spaghetti, a jar of spaghetti sauce, and, pre-made meatballs. So once you come home, all you need to do is put them together. So, just a small example of how our food systems have changed versus maybe making your own meatballs, making your own tomato sauce. So as you can see, quite drastic ways of getting food. So let's jump into a little bit of what we would call a healthy meal. I feel a good starting point is the USDA's MyPlate Guidelines. So, like I say, it's a good starting point. It's not applicable in the exact detail to everyone, but essentially what the MyPlate Guidelines say are, you start with half a plate of fruits and vegetables. You do 1/4 of grains, 1/4 plate of protein. I really do like this website, and they have an app. So again, USDA guidelines are government guidelines. You can go ahead and play around, look at recipes, and use this as a starting point. I do also want to mention that despite all the food changes and our lifestyle changes, the two concepts that really have not gone away are variety and moderation. So eating a variety of foods throughout the day and eating everything in moderation. So no foods are really off limits. And, it's one of those healthy patterns of nothing. It's not a bad food or a good food. We eat in moderation. The example that I like to give most of my patients is, even water, we know it's like an amazing beverage. You need it. Your body needs it. Even water in excess is not good for us. Okay, so let's take a deeper dive into what a healthy plate would look like. I'd like to really focus on vegetables first. So like I said, the USDA guidelines say half a plate for fruits and vegetables, I like to focus for my counseling sessions, let's really focus on half a plate of vegetables for most meals. Again, focusing on the variety of colors and textures. So if you take a little snapshot of how you eat at home, most of us have our limited 5, 6, 7, 10 vegetables that we like to eat, but I urge you to really expand and think of seasonal vegetables, think of vegetables that come in different colors, different textures, different patterns. So I have several listed out, your red and orange vegetables, your green leafy vegetables, and then starchy vegetables. Starchy vegetables really, I feel, deserve a special mention because you can use starchy vegetables in place of grain. So if you don't want to eat rice or bread, grab those potatoes, corn, and peas and use them as your starch. Another honorable mention in the vegetable category, I would say, is the beans, peas, and lentils. Just kind of going through several years and years of counseling, that's another thing that most of my patients don't really eat a lot of, is focusing on the beans. So yes, you go to Chipotle and you have beans in your burrito, but really making them an important part of our daily diet is what I would recommend. And these beans, peas, and lentils, not only are they part of the vegetable group, we can have them for protein and starch. So really just superstars in terms of meals. Moving on to protein. So the average adult only needs about 5 to 7 ounces of protein per day. So when we say protein, right, most of us think, okay, meat. Yes, meat is fantastic in terms of, it's a fantastic source of protein. So we really want to focus on lean meat. So we're talking chicken, fish, or turkey, other fatty meats, generally not recommended for daily consumption. And I'll mention the beans, peas, and lentils again. Fantastic source of protein. I always encourage my patients to buy, the dry beans, buy them in dry packets instead of canned. They're much cheaper in packets versus cans, and then you're not getting the added sodium and preservative from the canned versions. Soaking them overnight improves digestibility. So I hear a lot, oh my God, I can't eat beans because they cause massive gas and discomfort. Soak them overnight, or soak them even for a few hours. You could use a pressure cooker, you could cook them on a stovetop. But then, freezing them in small quantities that you could use later is generally a great idea, because then they're just ready to be, reheated and eaten. So you don't need to go through the whole process again. Another great source of protein are nuts and seeds. So I always urge patients to buy them, either raw or dry roasted. Nuts, they're a fantastic source of protein, fantastic source of vitamins and minerals. But once you add a bunch of salt and sugar and flavorings, that kind of takes away from their healthy status. So really focusing on nuts, nut butters, seeds in their raw form or dry roasted form without a lot of added sugar. So if you go to the store and you're buying nut butters, look at the ingredients label and buy the nut butter that just has, let's say, roasted almonds, right? But if you're buying the nut butter that has almonds, sugar, salt, chocolate sauce, that's not the best choice. That becomes a dessert then. Eggs, another fantastic source of protein. And then soy products. So I know in the recent years, there's been a huge push for, these plant-based products. So whether you're talking burgers or ground meat, just be careful that you're buying the products that don't, again, have that tons of added salt and sugar, because that takes away from whatever health benefit you were aiming to get for them just by having that added sodium and sugar. So in the protein category, just to quickly recap, really focusing on the lean protein for meats, and then identifying all these other sources of plant-based protein without the added fat, salt, and sugar. So if there was one thing that I would say limit in the protein category, it would be those processed meats, those lunch meats, pre-seasoned meats. Again, pre-seasoned because they generally, once have a ton of added sodium. And then the fatty meats, that's something that should be enjoyed not on a daily basis. The biggest complaint I get from my patients, are you telling me not to eat bacon? Well, bacon is not something that we should enjoy every day. So Focusing on grains. So again, using the whole wheat grains more frequently. So we're talking about rice, oats, corn, barley, focusing on the whole grain. So if you're looking to eat rice, choose whole grains. Pasta, choose whole grains more often. The things that you really want to stay away from are the instant and the refined processed grains. So we're talking instant rice, or anything that's pre-seasoned, pre-packaged, ready to go, generally has a ton of added sodium to it. And then those muffin mixes or flavored oatmeals, again, just added sugar. So I tell a lot of my patients, hey, if you're going to have oatmeal, it's just as easy to get rolled oats, pop them in the microwave or the stovetop, versus buying those flavored packets that have that ton of added sugar to it. And then bread. So if you think about how breads are made, if you were to make bread at home, you literally need 5 ingredients. So you need wheat, salt, sugar, yeast. Flour, salt, sugar, yeast, and water. If you wanted to get really fancy, you could add, some butter and eggs. So bread in itself only needs those handful of 5 to 7 ingredients. But, just go to the grocery store, pick up an average loaf of bread, and you're going to find, dough conditioners and preservatives, added salt, added sugar. So if you're going to buy breads, not only focusing on the whole grains, but also focus on buying things that are with minimal processed ingredients, minimal added salt and sugar. Okay. So now that we know what to eat, right? And of course, I focused on a few main categories. Some practical tips on how to go about eating this food. Essentially, plan your meals ahead of time. Instead of sort of waiting to be hungry, most of us, I find, in all my years of counseling, is, again, we eat the same kind of meals or similar kind of meals, very similar kind of things we enjoy. So plan those. And you don't have to, spend your entire weekend meal planning or meal prepping, but at least having some kind of idea. Okay, well, I'm going to eat about, these sources of protein, these kind of vegetables, these kind of grains. Shop appropriately, and then you have those meals, just like a rough picture of your meals in your head planned for the week. I also really encourage choosing a vegetable first. So if most of us, we're just sort of conditioned, right? So if we were to say, hey, what are we having for dinner? We think, oh, I'm having beef or chicken or pork or turkey. But choose a vegetable first. So challenge yourself to say, hey, I'm going to start with a vegetable. So, hey, you know what? It's summer right now, and I'm going to have asparagus. What goes well with asparagus? Maybe some salmon, maybe a grilled chicken breast, maybe some mixed beans. So choose a vegetable, add your protein, and then add your starch or starchy vegetable or grain to finish off your meal. And then based on your preferences, shop appropriately. So if you go to the grocery store hungry or without sort of a plan of what you're going to eat, what your family is going to eat, you may end up buying a lot of things that you may not know how to put together in a meal, or just a lot of impulse shopping, or things that may sit in your pantry for years and years and then you end up throwing away. So really go in with a plan your meals loosely, and then shop appropriately for them. The biggest thing that I would say stay away from for daily food prep would be just the pre-made sauces, the pre-made spice mixes. Anything, again, if you are not controlling the sauces, the mixes, you're not controlling the amount of sodium, you're not controlling the amount of salt. So I urge you to consider, buying spices. And a lot of, especially in the Bay Area, there's a lot of ethnic grocery stores that do have spices for actually quite cheap compared to, your regular grocery store. And you can experiment with those, right? So if you've never used cumin, go ahead and buy a small pack of cumin. It adds a lot of depth of flavor. If you've not used paprika before, or turmeric before, or you don't really use ginger, start adding those spices either in the dry form or the fresh form to your meals, and then see how you like those flavors, how you enjoy those flavors. So what you would essentially end up doing is using those spices, using those flavors, and coming up with flavor profiles that you like, versus, pouring a jar of something that a flavor that you can't control, the amount of salt and sugar that you can't control. I do recommend investing in, pre-chopped frozen vegetables, fantastic resource if you're short on time. Of course, if chopping carrots brings you joy, please go right ahead, buy those big boxes of broccoli or carrots or whatever vegetables. But frozen vegetables, the pre-chopped vegetables, fantastic resources for people short on time, or you just don't want to do it, and that's fine too. But that's one processed food that I would definitely recommend, is just vegetables that are pre-prepped. It saves you a lot of time. You can pull a bag out of the freezer, add it to a soup, add it to a stir fry, and just increase that amount of vegetable in your meals. And essentially it comes down to, I have a lot of people telling me, oh, I hate cooking and I really don't want to do it. But it's one of those, I consider it an essential life skill. And yes, you don't have to do it every day, but learning, simple meals, maybe simple stir fry, or, putting things in a sheet pan and putting it in the oven, just really, or, boiling rice and vegetables. So just really simple meals. You don't have to be the next Food Network chef, but learning to assemble those nice, simple meals can be really great for just having those healthy eating patterns, so you're not dependent on an outside entity to provide your meals. Okay. So if you were to go in today and throw out everything from your pantry and your fridge, here's a little shopping list to get you started. So we have an assortment of vegetables, a lot of standard vegetables, your broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, tomatoes, some sources of protein, some starches, again, brown rice, potatoes, corn, some whole grain breads, and then fruit. So here you have nothing in your fridge and pantry, and now you're starting from scratch. So here are some things to get you started. In addition to that, let's get you some spices. So, your standard salt, pepper, ginger. I added some Italian seasoning, and then maybe things that you may not have tried. So maybe some saffron or cardamom. I do like buying pre-made tomato sauce. So you can go to grocery stores and get the tomato sauce that doesn't have any salt or even seasonings added to it. So that could be a good starting point. You don't want to stand there and make your own tomato sauce. So get the ones that don't have a bunch of preservatives and additives and sodium. And then, of course, the superstars of our meals, the beans, the lentils, and peas, just to add that vegetable protein and carb. Okay, so based on the shopping list that I just put up, here are some meals that you could put together. So breakfast could be as simple as, a plain yogurt with some berries and honey. Your lunches and dinners could be some stir-fry broccoli and peppers with salmon and brown rice, or some cod with some cauliflower and beans, or pasta with some ground beans and some ground beef, salad, and tomatoes. And like I said, I would urge you to keep these meals as simple as possible without a bunch of added sauces and spices that you cannot control the amount of sodium and sugar in. Okay, so my final thoughts on, when we talk about meal prep are essentially plan your meals. Learn how to cook some simple meals or assemble simple meals. Minimize the processed food. So minimize the jars, the spices, the pre-made stuff. Of course, if you're in a pinch, go ahead and grab whatever's in your freezer. But what I really want to urge you to really think about is the amount of processed food that we consume really adds up. So whether it's lunches and dinners and breakfasts and snacks, really take a check and say, hey, can I make this simpler? Can I make this less processed? Instead of grabbing a fruit cup, can I grab a fruit instead? Instead of grabbing pre-made meatballs, maybe I just do ground beef. Instead of grabbing, pre-seasoned cod and salmon, can I just buy frozen fillets of fish and just season them myself with some vinegar and some salt and pepper, and perhaps that's good enough. So simplifying those meals, really looking for how we can limit the amount of processed foods we eat, and then using the labels, food labels, the ingredient lists to essentially make an informed decision of what we're putting in our body. So that's really it for, just kind of making those not friendly, just making those simple meals. And then sharing them with your friends and family, and also eventually coming to the point where you are able to figure out, hey, this is what works for me, this doesn't work for me. I can buy a limited amount of pre-made stuff, but use a lot of limited processed meals to make a complete, well-rounded meal. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if anyone
Yes.
does have questions for Rida, please head to our website and go to our contact us page, and we'll make sure that we get you in touch with her. This is such wonderful information. And I think really the theme is just get back to basics. It really doesn't have to be complicated. And I think that's kind of the whole point, is people kind of get intimidated if they're not used to cooking, and it doesn't have to be hard or complicated. So I think it's a good message to reiterate to people when they want to eat healthy.
Right. In most of my counseling, that's really what it comes down to, is like, let's simplify our meals. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of, this diet or this eating pattern or that eating pattern. And as I mentioned, right, the variety, moderation, and simple meals, it's really, that has just never gone away from being the crux of healthy eating.
Yeah, that's excellent. And we will have this up on our YouTube page too. So if anyone wants to go back and, look at the shopping list or the easy meals, that'll live on our YouTube page also. So thanks again for joining us today, Rida. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.